TE Talks with Guides is a weekly podcast for lovers of history, travel, and all things Italian. Welcome back, everybody, to TE Talks, sponsored by Through Eternity Tours. I'm your host, Rob Allen, and on TE Talks, we get to talk with some of the most fascinating people who make a living out of being wonderful storytellers. Now, if you've enjoyed this podcast and our others, please remember to write a review and give us 5 stars. It is extremely helpful to get the word out and let other people know about who we are and what we do. Today, I'm very happy to share with you one of our favorite guides in the Campania area, Andrea. Ciao, Andrea.
Ciao. Good evening to everybody. Ciao, Rob.
It's so great to finally have you here. I have to say, well, first of all, I always love to share with our listeners that you are an official guide for the Campania area, but you've been working with us for a long time. I wanted to ask you, how long have you been an official guide, and how long have you been working with Through Eternity?
I start to be an official guide in 2014, so it's about 7 years. I'm an old boy, but not a very young tour guide. And I start to work with you in 2016, so it's about 5 years.
Okay, that's right. So I would say, though, that you may think of yourself as young, but as a tour guide, remember back in the day, you are actually still pretty young. I remember when...
Oh, yes, I'm differently young, I can tell. I feel my spirit is about 15 years old, but my body, it's not anymore like that. Thanks God, the people are just listening to my voice. That's very good.
That's right. You were very clear to make sure that we were going to not be videotaping this.
Yes, absolutely.
For our listeners who don't know Andrea, we could joke around and say he has a face for radio, but he doesn't. He's actually a very handsome man. Now, just for listeners also to know, Andrea and I get along really well. For another fact is that we are both actors. Well, he's really more of a working actor than I am, but we both studied theater. And
that's important. That's why we are so connected, we can say.
Yes. And we love the drama.
Exactly.
Drama.
And as Italian, me, and as an Italian guy, I can tell about you, we are very dramatic. We can do something like with this kind of voice. That could be very interesting.
Absolutely. When you're going to listen to some of our other podcasts, you'll listen to one that I read. It's a recording that I read of a blog that Connor had written about the life of Caravaggio. Because since you look like Caravaggio, so it's a very dramatic reading, let's say, that I have.
Yeah, we can do it something in Italian, and you can translate directly in English. That could be very nice.
And I can also do it in your voice as well.
And that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, the office staff knows that I actually have a very good time imitating certain guides. As we go into Pompeii, you will see that. Anyway. But I'm doing Gino. I'm sorry, I'm making fun of you. I'm just, I always have a good time with you guys. Anyway, so for you guys, if you don't know, because a lot of you are great fans of the company, Andrea has done the most virtual tours through the pandemic with us, for us. Let me see if I remember them all, and then you can tell me the ones that I have not done. It is Pompeii, parts 1 and 2.
Exactly.
Naples, the heart of Naples. Dunque, Paestum.
Yeah.
You've done the islands like Ischia, Procida. They were all kind of together. Did you do the Amalfi Coast as well?
I did the Amalfi Coast and Capri. Yeah.
And Capri. Sicily. You did a lot in Sicily.
Yeah, I did also in my region. I also did the Phlegraean Fields, the super volcano area.
Yes, that area I can't wait to go and see. And then we did have to dole out some of the others to the other guides. But
then we did something about Sicily, Apulia. Yes, absolutely. Obviously, Apulia was just one virtual tour, and then in Sicily we split in Palermo, Agrigento, Syracuse, Catania, and Taormina, and blah blah blah. Some, I can tell. I did some. I worked a little bit. I have some free time in quarantines,
Well, people don't realize like how lucky it is for them that you were able to do that. This is what we've used that free time that we've had to create a lot of wonderful content. In fact, I don't think a lot of people even kind of understand what it means to be able to have guides talk with me for about an hour each. It's a gold mine, and I know a lot of other guides listen to these tours because we get a lot of great information shared between us. So I was really happy for you to do Pompeii for us because you are one of our main guides who does Pompeii, and I have lots of questions about Pompeii myself because when we were doing our TE destinations videos on YouTube. Certainly, you've seen some of those.
obviously.
And we are going to be doing season 2. And Dylan, who is the editor and does a lot of the taping of the videos, and I went to all over Italy. Not because we were stuck in Rome for the first series. So we had a wonderful time going down to Pompeii. We went to Naples, Pompeii, Capri, the Amalfi Coast, etc. in about 4 days. It was great. It was wonderful because it was October, so it wasn't super crowded.
That's
I had such a great day. So tell me, what would you tell people about Pompeii? Like, what is it that you think they should know before coming here to even attract them to see this site? What makes it so special?
When you think about Pompeii, the first things that you can get on your mind is the idea that you could have the opportunity to walk in the same identical place in which the Romans 2000 years ago, that they were humans like we are. They were walking and they were living and they were feeling emotion. That's what I try to transmit when I do tours in Pompeii. That obviously we talk about archaeology, we talk about history, we talk about beautiness, frescoes, and blah, blah, blah. But what is important, and that makes absolutely the great aspect of this site, is that in that identical places, touching the same identical stone on where we are walking, there were other people that they were just living before us in a different way, but they are absolutely still connected with us thanks to this incredible place. Wolfgang Goethe, that is a German writer living in the 18th century, he said when he visited Pompeii, the most incredible tragedy of the classical time gave us the opportunity to see the most incredible place. Because it's true, because we have the opportunity to face with the history and with the people, even if there are no people there, but they left something there that we can still feel close to us. This is what makes, I think, Pompeii really unique. Because if you think about the archaeological places, we have hundreds around the world. Why do you have to come here and to see just Pompeii? Because it's different. That's why.
It is different. I think you made such a wonderful point when you talk about the emotions with the stones.
That's my dramatic part,
Well, of course, feel the stones and feel the emotions, but it is emotional because of the way that they had you can see the bodies, the plasters of the bodies. I think that also
the plaster. Yeah, but the plaster. When you think about the plaster, you have to remember that you are talking about something that was technically made by someone else. I mean,
sure.
The plaster were created from the 1861 by the idea of this incredible archaeologist. His name was Giuseppe Fiorelli. He said, we can feel the empty spaces when we are able to find it, because you have to remember that we're talking about the 19th century. There was no scientific things that they can really feel and see what they have underground. Now it's easier. But the idea of recreating this body, it was a way to look at. What I'm referring to about the emotion, about the daily life, it's even about the graffiti. Looking at a graffiti made by a child that was probably playing in his home, it's something absolutely unique, because you can recreate a connection with that child in that specific moment and try to understand what was his interest. Because we have a lot of graffiti made by child, probably made by child because they are very low. That's why we believe that they are made by child, of gladiators. Today, which kind of graffito you can have on a wall made by a child? Probably, who knows, something written like I love Maria, or something I love Maneskin, the rock singers.
Sure.
Their life was the gladiators. The gladiators were like, and so it's a way to be reconnected with them, with what they like, what they feel, which kind of emotion they were feeling. They were not so different from us. I mean, they were people like we are, just living in a different moment with different kind of tools, we can say, but expressing themselves in the same identical way. That's what I mean about the emotion. I don't know if my English is clear enough to express what I want to say, but I hope to. Tell me yes, please.
No, it is. It's absolutely clear. It's clear for me.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go into it. Okay, if you had your choice, where, not before what we're obliged to see, because I know that one goes from Naples and takes a train, unless you have a private car drive you out there, you take a train from the Circonvallazione Vesuviana.
Circumvesuviana.
Circonvesuviana, okay. Oh, I live on
Yes.
Circonvallazione, Circonvesuviana.
No, Circonvallazione is a street. No, Circumvesuviana, that is a train.
Circonvesuviana.
Exactly.
Thank you. What gate would you like? How would you ideally, if you could have your way, how would you show people?
Okay, if I can suggest, we have three entrances in Pompeii. That's very important to say. The first entrance is exactly in front of the train. It's called the Porta Marina Superior. That is the main entrance. It's usually exactly the entrance that was from the seaside. That's why we call Porta Marina, Marine Gate. And the first, it's probably very interesting because it's like entering into the town. You have the view of the walls of the gate, and outside the gate, you have a fantastic bath that they were the suburban bath of the city. So outside the city, because the Romans were very clean, they were like, you can't go inside if you are not getting a shower before. That was very good because people were using ships for days and days, sometimes weeks and weeks. So probably their smell was not perfect. And also the way in which they consider the bath. You know, the Romans were the first one calling the bath spa, S-P-A. That means salus per aquam, health through the water. But at the same time, even if it's so beautiful, because you get the impression of entering in the town, it's a little bit high. I mean, you have to go up for about 10 minutes. And if you feel that your body need to be, you know, it seems to be, should be very fit to enter from there, because the entrance, it's like you reach the upper side when you have the forum, the central square, and you are like that. Me too, because it's very hard. The second entrance is that what I suggest to use. It's Porta Marina Inferior. It's the lower part of the same gate. It's very easy to find. You can ask to the entrance because it's really 2 minutes walking, and you have a flat area, and you enter from the theater. That's very fascinating too, because you reach the so-called Quadriporticus. That was a place in which the gladiators were training from the 62 AD till 79. Remember that in the 79, there was the explosion. In the 62, we know that there was a very terrible earthquake. And we also know that before the 62, that place was probably something else. What? Was a foyer of the theater, a place in which the people, the spectators, were drinking and spending their time. Meanwhile, they were attending to the theater, because there's no connection between gladiator and theater. That's important. The gladiators are performing into the amphitheater.
Yes.
That's another side of the city. So the second entrance, you reach the Quadriporticus, you cross this training area for the gladiators after the 62, as I told you, and then you reach the big theater, that was the comedy and tragedy theater, and the small theater, that is a fantastic Odeon. That's why you call auditorium the place for music, that it's 100% authentic. Even the floor, mosaics floor, it's completely authentic, date to the 80 before Jesus Christ. We found the marble slab. That's why we can tell when it was made. This is the second entrance. Then we have a third entrance, a little bit less crowded. That's why it's another good alternative, not exactly close to the Circumvesuviana, but very close to the train station of Trenitalia. Okay, but remember the difference. Trenitalia is the official train going all around Italy. From Naples station, you can take both Trenitalia train or Circumvesuviana. When you take Trenitalia, you reach this other entrance that is exactly in front of the amphitheater. So it's a little bit more like outside the city center, but it's still very fascinating. But the experience is very different. I mean, you reach an area in which there's a lot of space, differently from the other one, in which the area are not so, the area it's not so, I don't want to say large, but because obviously you have a lot of people now, because Pompeii is very crowded, and the space are not so huge as in the amphitheater gate. So remember, 3 gate, Porta Marina Superior, Porta Marina Inferior, and amphitheater.
Yes, and you want to go to take your people, you would go through the
Porta Marina Inferior. That's what I suggest, especially because I don't want that they are getting tired exactly after 10 minutes that we start the tour. That's why.
Sure. I mean, when I go through there, it's a as the Italians use the word suggestivo, very suggestive place, very dramatic. It is a wonderful place. I think it has a great merit to go with you to be taken with someone like you who can make it really come alive. I just adored this fact that you come and you talk about the emotions of the place. When Dylan and I went through, because I've been there a few times before, but each time I have to say it's different. You know, it's never the same because it is so vast. It's much bigger than Herculaneum. I had a lovely podcast with Francesca, and she even took me around Herculaneum, which I also love very much. That is a place where I think you can do well in an hour and a half.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is also, but I mean, it's just that there are so many places, so many things. And for people who've never been to Pompeii, they don't realize, like you were saying, that they take these casts of the bodies. And so you see people who are in dramatic positions. And I know that you started your virtual tour. It's a way that you talk about within a series of levels of the eruptions that were happening at night and how long it took. It was very different from Herculaneum. It took an amount of time. And I think that you were saying they are people like us, and we go there, and what we know of is the greatest tragedy that happened, like very, weather-wise, even though like nowadays, every other day, there's something horrific that's happening in the world because we're much more connected. You could connect to maybe, what do you think? It was the not knowing, this terrifying idea, fear. What emotions would you think of with this? There are people who chose to run, people who chose to stay, because it took a long time for it to be buried.
Obviously, what we can say, that when you think about archaeology, you have to be sure about what you are saying. And in this aspect, we have no evidence. We have just 2 letters written by a guy called Pliny the Younger that was not in Pompeii, but was in Misenum on the Phlegrean Fields, where the fleet was. Yeah. And he said that obviously the atmosphere was terrifying. It was very hard. It was very noisy. The people were screaming. What about the people in Pompeii? I honestly think that they were very surprised, first of all, because nobody was thinking that Mount Vesuvius was a volcano. That's very important to remember. They were just thinking that there was a mountain, and there was just one geographer a couple of centuries before writing about the Mount Vesuvius, and he said that the Mount Vesuvius was a volcano no more active. So that means that this volcano was not considered a volcano. Second aspect that we have to remember, the volcano have different behavior. I mean, the volcano are not the same everywhere. They have experience of volcano in Sicily, the Romans, the Mount Etna. But Mount Etna is an effusive volcano. It's not an explosive volcano. You have lava flow going out. Obviously, you can run away with the lava. You don't have to think about the lava in Pompeii, because if the lava was arriving there, especially on the level of the streets, everything was completely destroyed. I don't know if you have seen what is happening now, for example, in La Palma, in Spain, on Canary Island. But obviously, all this explosion, it's an explosion of an effusive volcano. That's why you have got so much lava, and everything has been completely destroyed. In Pompeii, when the people start to see this mountain, what they got was just the ash. And the ash, the first reaction that probably these people have, okay, guys, stay inside, because the ash could be creating you problem walking, and it was raining on your body. But obviously that was a terrible idea, because staying inside means that all the roof were crumbling, because obviously after a while the ash didn't stop, and the accumulation of the ash is creating this big quantity, and everything is crumbling on them. A lot of people died because of that. And what happened to the people instead that tried to be out or try to run? We know for sure that some people were probably leaving the city. We also know, that's very important, that a lot of people running away from the city before the eruption because of the earthquake. We know that from the 62 to 79, we have so many earthquakes, even if we have nothing written, but that's a natural way for preparing an explosion, such a big explosion, that a lot of people ran away because they were afraid about gods. They believed that the gods were punishing the town. And how we can tell that, because that's another important thing. We found just 1,300 bodies of a population of around 20,000. We know that the population was around 20,000 because this is the number of seats into the amphitheater, usually slaves included. But what happened? That probably a lot of people ran away before. About this 1,300, probably that was not all the population, even because we have to remember that 20% is still under the ash, okay? So we have other people down there. But some of these people, during the eruption, they were probably running away, and they tried to run. Which kind of way they have? I mean, how they can go away from Pompeii? They can run by the sea, but the sea was too rough. And the level of the sea was changing because of the accumulation of the ash, even in the sea, and the big volcanic rocks that they were erupting from the mountain. Second, they can run away using the opposite side, so going towards the south, because the Mount Vesuvius is in the north. And this was another way. But at the same time, we know that they need to cross a river that was in the southern part, is still there. It's called the Sarno River. And on the Sarno River, for sure, they have bridges. But after a couple of hours of raining ash, even the bridge were collapsing. So it was even impossible to cross the river. And that's why what we think is that some of these people were probably coming back to Pompeii. And when the ash was stopping, they believed that the mountain was stopping too. But obviously the mountain was just preparing the worst part. That was the pyroclastic flow. That it's a gas of about 800 Fahrenheit plus small rocks, big rocks, and water. The water is coming from a storm created by the eruption. All these things together became like a hot mud that is going to cover and destroy everything. This was what happened, that was destroying Herculaneum, as you know, and was killing the people in Pompeii in the morning after. The eruption started at 1 o'clock. It was probably finishing the day after. But it seems to be not 100% sure. We can't tell exactly how long was and when it was going to finish. But for sure, the people that we have as a cluster, they were killed on the upper level of the accumulation of the ash before. So just to finish and to conclude your questions, I think they were surprised, and then they got a lot of fear, and then they were probably hoping that they could survive.
That's fascinating. Of course, it brings everyone, I think, back to this kind of horrific event. But in the horror of what had happened, there is something that gave us a unique ability. I think something, I'm not sure if wonderful is the right word, but it is unbelievably fortunate for us that we have, because of what had happened, we have this ancient Roman city completely preserved with some of the greatest treasures of the Roman Empire, that we understand many things throughout any area of Italy that deals with ancient Roman ruins because of what was discovered in Pompeii. And Pompeii was discovered, I believe, was it discovered before Herculaneum, or were they discovered at the same time?
No, it was discovered Herculaneum before.
Ah, Herculaneum before.
1710, that was the discovery of Herculaneum, 1748. And that's why when you think about all the first books written about this excavation, you can say that the 99% were named Antiquities of Herculaneum.
Fascinating.
But then they understood that Herculaneum was more difficult to excavate, and that's why they stopped there, because Herculaneum was covered by 90 feet of ash. Pompeii was covered by about 18, 20 feet of ash. So that's why.
It's incredible. I just know that when I went there, because what you see are the ancient Roman houses. You've already brought up the theater. I had been there before I learned to be a guide in 1997, and I went into the amphitheater and I didn't understand it. And then after learning how to be a guide and learning after living in Italy for so long, first of all, the first thing I recognized is walking out. I was amazed by it because I said, oh gosh, because they even had an exhibit about Pompeii in the Colosseum for like 2 months this year. And they have many treasures from the Archaeological Museum of Naples. So they have the famous fresco, right, of the, what was it? It was like a rioting. There was a rioting of the gladiators were fighting outside the amphitheater in Pompeii itself, with that strange staircase that goes up the side. And that's exactly the way it looks today. So that was for me amazing to see. It was also amazing to go in because the acoustics are incredible inside the amphitheater. In fact, with our TE Destinations video, we have our introduction or our conclusion there because of the acoustics. I thought it was just, that is something that you don't have in the Colosseum, but I'm sure that the Colosseum did have that, but it's been
obviously it have. You know why? I think it's also a little bit complicated to get this acoustic in the Colosseum, even because in the underground of Colosseum are completely open, so you don't have any more the resonance chamber underground that create this effect. Even if, however, in Pompeii the underground never exists. Differently from Pozzuoli, that is in the Phlegraean fields, in which you still can see the perfect condition of the underground. That's another destination we have to talk about.
Oh, yes, we do have to talk about. In fact, we have to do a video about that. I have to go. That's going to be a whole new thing to go down to Phlegraean fields. I know Grayson went down. She said it was wonderful. And I was talking to Monica about it, too. Absolutely. It was also when we ended up our day at Pompeii, we walked out of one of the other gates of the city. I forget the name of the gate, but you'll know because it has that very famous kind of villa that's outside the city with some of the most
steady.
Yes. Okay. With the beautiful mosaic, the beautiful frescoes.
Yes.
Of like the life-size figures.
Yes.
Which are, oh my God, I think they're first century BC, if I'm not mistaken.
They are second century BC, and obviously it's named Villa dei Misteri, Mysteries Villa, because it seems to be still like a sort of mysteries dedicated to Dionyso, the god of the wine. Seems to be like, how can I say in English, initiation? Is it correct? Initiation for a lady before to be married to the sexuality. So, but it's still under interpretation. I mean, it's not 100% sure the meaning, even because you have to remember that Dionysus mysteries are religious, mysterious. I mean, it was something not for everybody. I mean, it was something that should be interpreted. It's like a sort of Freemasons representation of the time. And that's why the most part of that fresco, especially on the room you were talking about, are still under a lot of study. But I also have to tell you that the same is happening with the new excavation. Because the new excavations, for example, they found a beautiful mosaics in one of the two houses excavated with an Orion, this representation of the stars with some symbolism of animals surrounding him, still under studies, because obviously you can get a lot of interpretation differently according to what you see. And that makes another reason why you have to go to Pompeii, because not for everybody one thinks it could mean exactly the same. That's incredible, and that's also part of being humans. We can travel with our imagination. We don't have to be so well educated to use your imagination. That's why I love to be a guide even with children, because they see something that we don't anymore.
Absolutely. I remember so many different things that you're pointing out, because on the way down to the amphitheater, as you said, it's almost a little bit further out from the main center of the forum in Pompeii. And it seems like, oh, you have all these buildings built along the sides of a hill, when actually, no, they just haven't been excavated.
Yes.
It's amazing. And it was amazing going down to the Villa de Misteri. It was so lovely to finish out there, because we got to a point where we happened upon the house of the prostitutes, the so-called house of the Lupinati, which of course everyone loves to see. But then we filled out, it was this beautiful October golden light, and we walked out. I loved getting through the gate, or what was left of the gate, and then going on the road, because the road, you really still see an incredible amount of tombs along the road.
Yes.
Which is what all Roman cities were like. The dead were buried outside, and they were still
outside the walls, exactly. And we have cemetery in the southern part and the northern part, depending on which side you are walking out. Obviously, when you are going to Villa de Misteri, you are in the northern side and you cross this incredible amount of tombs you are talking about. It's the same if you go out from the amphitheater area, that is the southern part, in which you have all these fantastic tombs. Some of these tombs are giving us a lot of information, even about the people. And some of these tombs are also excavating a little bit away from the center, away from the area that we consider the ruins, because obviously we are at the new town now that is surrounding the old ones. And sometimes you discover things that are a little bit away from the archaeological site, but they were part of the outside city. So that's why even with this symmetry aspect, you can get a lot of information about the way in which they were living, and especially who were the people important in Pompeii, because clearly we have no information about the slaves and the poor people. We have information about the rich people, that they were making the difference in town. But this is like everywhere. It's exactly like now.
Mm-hmm. My goodness. So can I ask you, two other things I want to ask you, and I promise I won't keep you on, because you and I could be talking about this for a long time. Pliny the Younger, you mentioned, was at the Phlegraean Fields, and he was writing, describing what he was seeing. But his uncle, Pliny the Elder, was also there, and he was the one who went out on a boat and went too close to where this was happening, and then he supposedly died from the toxic fumes.
Yes.
Is that correct?
100% he died. It's not a supposition. It's something that we know, that he died. He tried to stop in Herculaneum, but he was not able to reach the coast. And then he stopped to Stabia, where probably he was spending the night, obviously before the pyroclastic arrived, to a villa, one of the villa, because you have to remember that all the coast of Campania was full of villas, because this was the central economy, the central military, the fleet of Mediterranean was here. And so the most important Roman senators or rich people were living here. He was clearly he was the chief in commander of the fleet based in the Phlegraean Fields. And then he probably died because of the pyroclastic the morning after. We don't know exactly how he died and when exactly, but we know that he died because of that. And he was also very curious. He was not just trying to help the people. He was also a scientist. He tried to read and to know about the nature, and he was probably very fascinating about the explosion. You can imagine how beautiful it probably was for these people looking at this volcano. Also terrifying, I can tell. But thinking about me, I am from Naples, and I live in front of the Mount Vesuvius. I can tell you that now the Mount Vesuvius is sleeping from 1944, and I hope that the next one would be not so bad, but I know that would be. At the same time, another part of me would like to see the mountain not erupting, but a little bit with smoke, because we haven't seen. My generation have seen nothing from the Mount Vesuvius, but I can definitely say that Pliny was probably super fascinated by what was happening. That's why he even died.
Yes, because he was also one of the great writers of the ancient Latin world.
Absolutely.
That we know about. Be careful what you wish for, Andrea, because do you know that famous saying, be careful what you wish for, you may just get it. I would say go down to see Etna. Well, you've seen Etna erupting, I'm sure, which is a nice, safer
Two
thing.
times. Two times. I see. Once I was also in Taormina, so there was a fantastic view because it was in front, and you hear the sound.
Yeah.
But it's not an explosion. And then
No, but
small
it's a little
explosion. You can
safer.
imagine what is a great explosion that was like in US, Mount St. Helens, Mount Krakatoa, or all the big explosive volcanoes that are creating problems, big problems, but at the same time, that's the power of nature.
Yes, that is true. Now, if you like, for me, I would think sometimes, when you take people around to places, for me, I kind of think of my nightmare job would have to be giving tours of the catacombs, like the official catacombs guides, like 5 times a day. I think if you go to Pompeii, because you are very passionate about it, one could still hear and feel this when you talk about things, which is wonderful. I would go in and also try to bring positive things about it because it's not, you just don't want to have people falling into being, too much touched into this stuff. What do you find as a positive aspect? Do you try to make things also show them the opportunities, things that are wonderful and beautiful from this? Or like how do you deal with it? Or do you just make people feel like, wow, we've walked through a tragedy?
No, because no, I can tell you that obviously the tragedy is just the occasion that give us the opportunity to see. And obviously, we need to talk about what happened for the people to let you understand why we have the city still there. But after talking about this, we have to talk about life because that was a life place. It's not like just a skeleton of a ghost city. No, it's a place in which you can see bars, a place in which you can see bakery, a place in which you can walk into the houses and you can still see the fresco on the wall. So you can feel that the city is a place in which you have the opportunity to respect, first of all, the history, to see how they were living in the past, to understand how incredible modern were the Romans, having drainage system, not in Pompeii, but in Herculaneum, have perfect streets, have wonderful sidewalk, have places to stop the animals and to park the animals, to tie up the animals. That's something that you think, okay, it's normal, but it's not because you can see how they were doing. And all these small aspects, I think, are just the great way to think, okay, these people were living 2,000 years ago. For some aspect, they were even better than us because probably in terms of respecting nature, in the garden of a house, they have a very big respect of nature. They live in contact with the nature much more than we do. From the other side, obviously, they were very violent. They were having gladiators. They were having slaves. That it's something unbelievable for us. They don't have electricity, and it's very sad to say, but they were using gladiators like we use electricity, like we are pressing the world and try to get the best that we can say. Sometimes not exactly the best, but at the same time we need it. They were doing exactly the same with the slaves. So I think it's important to leave this experience, not a tragedy, but also the funny way, like the brothel, for example, or like the way in which they live the sexuality. All these aspects are nothing to do with the tragedy, because the tragedy is just to understand, and that's it. And then we talk about life, because it's a place of life. It's not a place of death, at least for me.
Well, thank you. That was wonderful. Every time we talk about it, it's always something new. I'm sure when you go in there, I mean, for me, every time is something new. Andrea, I very much appreciate this discussion, and I'm going to lock you into in the future because we have to go through Naples because you live in Naples and talk about Spaccanapoli and the experience of these wonderful areas that are truly unique. We got to talk about the Phlegrain fields. We have to talk about Paestum as well. So get ready.
Whenever you like.
Sure, certo. Come no. All right, everybody. Thank you all very much again.
Thank you. Thank you.
And please, if you have any questions for Andrea or for me, please feel free to write at office@througheternity.com. Thanks very much, everybody. Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you for listening to our TE Talks with Guides. We have a new episode every Wednesday. Please subscribe to get an alert when each podcast comes out. Rate us and tell people how you enjoyed it and share it on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Most importantly, if you enjoyed it, send us a feedback about the show. Also, if you are curious about what some of these people and places we talked about look like, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch the video on this podcast where we have inserted special images for you to further enjoy the story.